Hi guys and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the RFK Jr. speech about autism because I cannot seem to go on my feed without seeing somebody posting about stop curing autism.
Leave it alone! Please!
And I wanted to assess what the protocol is that RFK is going into for you live so that you could understand my opinion and also what I perceive and gain from the action that RFK is attempting to take and what it relates to for people who are autistic around the world. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Let's take a look.
I'm going to go over some of the key numbers from the ADHD report. Overall, the autism is increasing in prevalence at an alarming rate. The study tests 8-year-olds who were born in 2014. And by the way, these studies are 2 years later than they should be. And one of the things that we're going to do as we move this function to the Administration for a Healthy America, to the chronic disease division, the new chronic disease division, is we are going to have updated real-time data so that people can look at this, so Americans can understand what is happening with chronic disease in this country in real time, and not have to wait 2 years to react. We don't wait 2 years to react to a measles epidemic, and we should not, or any kind of infectious disease. We shouldn't have to do that for diabetes or autism. The ASD prevalence rate in 8-year-olds is now 1 in 31. Shocking. There's an extreme risk for boys. Overall, the risk for boys of getting an autism diagnosis in this country is now 1 in 20.
So the rates have definitely shot up. And one of the arguments is that we're now testing more and that we're seeing more people being diagnosed that maybe wouldn't have been diagnosed previously. But we also kind of have to look at this from a balanced opinion of, is there something else that's contributing to this? And as you hear RFK talking about this, he also talks about chronic diseases, which is something that he looks into. And I don't think he's conflating ASD as a chronic disease. What I think he's talking about is that chronic diseases are definitely on the rise. And some of the reasons why those chronic diseases are on the rise, such as diabetes, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, these things are continuing because we have a society that pushes anything but health. So you can see this recently with like the Ozempic drug. You know, people want to have something that's easy without actually having to do anything about it. They don't want to exercise. They don't want to learn how to eat healthily. They want to learn how to continue eating all the shit food that they eat consistently, food-like products. Just have to eat less of it so that they can actually lose weight. None of this is healthy. None of that is healthy. And so what we have is a society that wants to receive pharmaceuticals because it feels easier, it feels more convenient, instead of actually having personal autonomy. And what RFK, to my mind, is attempting to do is to look at where we have this intersection of pharmaceutical industry and food industry that is actually putting stuff in our food, putting stuff in our pharmaceuticals. It goes into the water, by the way, guys, because we're all peeing into recycled water. So if you have tap water, we have these prevalence of medications that are coming back through for us. Because, I mean, we don't reverse osmosis filter our water in the UK, and they don't do it in America as far as I'm aware. So you see these constant pollutants, micro pollutants that we are seeing on a daily basis that people are being assaulted by. Now, it's very easy to sit in a science lab and say, 1 part per million of this isn't dangerous for people. But when we have in the food, in the water, in the air, in our pharmaceuticals, in our body products, don't you think that begins to build up at some point? So what RFK is looking at is there something that is exterior, epigenetic, environmental, that is causing more chronic diseases to be diagnosed? And is that to do with environmental pollutants? Is that to do with food? Is that to do with vaccines? Is it to do with any of those things? And I don't see any problem with that. I think that's very sensible to start to look at these things. Let's hear what else he's got to say.
And as high in California, which has the best data collection, So it probably also reflects the national trend, 1 in 12.5 boys. This is part of an unrelenting upward trend. The prevalence 2 years ago was 1 in 36. Since the first ADDM report in 1990, which was 1992 births, autism has increased by a factor of 4.8. That's 480%, I believe. The first ADDM survey was 22 years ago when prevalence was 1 in 150 children. In all the core states, the trend is consistently upward, and most cases now are severe. So about 25% of the kids who are diagnosed with autism are nonverbal, non-toilet trained, and have other stereotypical features, head banging, tactile and light sensitivities, stimming, toe walking, etc.
So to see an increase of up to 25% of those people having severe level 3 autism, the thing I have a problem with this at the moment is that the voices that are being heard are people like me, people with Asperger's, people with level 1. We're not hearing very many people who have level 2 autism, and we're certainly not hearing it at all from anybody who has level 3 autism. And to have this level of severe disability, we as individuals who are not that disabled do not actually understand how that impacts that person's life. We don't know what it's like to exist in those bodies, and it might be absolute fucking heaven. We don't know, but I kind of imagine it probably isn't. Okay, and I think it's fair to say that if we are seeing people who are severely disabled, there is a desire and a want to maybe help them to be less disabled, and I think that this is where this is coming from. Now, if we were to learn that, for instance, a food dye or sugar or some form of chemical that we were putting in food or water, or chlorine in the water, or fluoride in the toothpaste, whatever. If we were to learn that this chemical or this additive is causing people who would be typically like myself to be level 3 autistic and disabled by their autism, why on earth would we not want to know about that? It would be the biggest scandal of modern day history. You know, I think about this at the moment, like with the thalidomide. Thalidomide was something that was given to pregnant women, and they were told this is perfectly safe. And actually what happened was it caused their children to be born with defective limbs and stunted growth. And the parents were gaslit and said, oh, it can't be the thalidomide, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. And then after a little while, it turned out, oh, actually, hang on a minute, it is the thalidomide. Now, the problem is, and this is what RFK is talking about, is by the time we get round to actually studying something, we've had 2 to 3 to 5 years of people being affected by whatever it is that's causing the problem. Now, I've seen some people who are in the autism community saying, like, this is the beginning of the genocide of autistic people. And I just think you guys are insane because the fact that they're trying to come up with a registry that we can look at what's going on with people in real time with autism is so that we can understand more. It's a ridiculous leap to go from let's try to help people to how can we kill everybody. This registry isn't about trying to kill all of the autistic people. It's about trying to help us. And RFK has spent his life doing this work. So why on earth do you think that he would suddenly change tact? And I'll say it's because a lot of people don't like Trump because they read just the headlines. And so anybody that is associated with him, they just assume is a Nazi. But none of these people are Nazis, guys. Please look up the definition of what a Nazi is before you start throwing that word around because it's offensive.
One of the things that I think that we need to move away from today is this ideology that the autism diagnosis, that the autism prevalence increases, the relentless increases, are simply artifacts of better diagnoses, better recognition, or changing diagnostic criteria. If you look at Table 3 of the ADDM report, it's clear that the rates are real, that they are increasing in the last 10 years, which is the beginning with the first one. year by year, there is a steady, relentless increase. I want to, because this epidemic denial has become a feature in the mainstream media, and it's based on an industry canard. And obviously, there are people who don't want us to look at environmental exposures.
Yeah, and the people that don't want him to look at the environmental exposures are the ones that are benefiting from your sickness. They're benefiting from giving you drugs. They're benefiting from you, eating their crap food. They're benefiting from you being poisoned. Up until the 1970s, we used to have lead in petrol. There's the theory that a lot of the boomers are the way that they are because basically they have lead poisoning, which causes, memory issues, aggression. The whole idea about being a Karen, is it lead poisoning from their generation? Now, this is 30 years later that we're now viewing the possible effects of what keeping lead in petrol. Okay. If at that time there'd been somebody that said, guys, I think the lead is causing it, why wouldn't you look into this? The only people that benefit from having lead in the petrol are the huge petrochemical companies that make shit tons of money off of us by making us sick with a pollutant. And it's the same petrochemical companies that were also beginning a lot of the pharmaceuticals. So follow the money. If you start to follow the money back to who benefits from it, it isn't the people, and it isn't people like me, and it certainly isn't the parents or the children that I've worked with for most of my career that have level 2, level 3 autism. None of those children are benefiting from petrochemical companies having absolutism to be able to poison us and our society and our environment. And I find it really, really strange that it seems to be the people who are on the left at this present moment, politically, that seem to want to fight this. Because I thought, as far as I was aware, the left was about keeping the environment clean and helping people to live happy, free, healthy lives. And I see that this is what he's attempting to do. But because there's this right-wing rhetoric that's around the American government at the moment, everybody's just screaming fascism, everybody's screaming Nazis, everybody's screaming genocide, which again, I'm not easily offended, but that rhetoric is offensive. It's offensive to say that this is the same as the beginning of the Holocaust in Germany. And I'm saying this because I've seen this throughout this whole week. I'm making this video because I'm sick of people saying this. And as somebody a part of the autistic community, I'm glad this research is being done.
Just read you some of the little excerpts from some of the older studies. The baseline for autism in this country was established with the biggest, largest epidemiological study in history. A study of all 900,000 children in the state of Wisconsin. Children under the age of 12, they found 0.7 children had autism in every 10,000. That's less than 1 in 10,000. Today, we're 1 in 31.
So 1 in 10,000 compared to 1 in 31 is the increase. That's not about good diagnosis, guys. There's something else that's going on. Now, what we have to also look at is that there's a possibility that people are being diagnosed with autism that don't actually have the neurodevelopmental condition. And actually what they're having is a reaction to pollutants in their environment. And if we remove those pollutants in the environment, we may begin to see that these behaviors lessen in those people. But without actually exploring this and without actually questioning it and without actually coming to it with an open mind, there's no way that any of us can learn this. And what I'm seeing a lot from the autistic community is just a blanket shutdown of autism doesn't need curing, go away with your research, we're not interested. Now, I'm currently doing a master's in psychology and I will be doing my research on neurodevelopmental issues. I will be doing it on neurodivergence. Now, does that mean that everybody that is in my study is being rounded up so I can murder them all? No, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous assumption.
Awesome. In 1987, there was another exhaustive study, a peer-reviewed study in North Dakota, set out to count every child in the state with a pervasive developmental disorder, including autism. That study meticulously combed through every record, every diagnosis, and he even conducted in-person assessments of the entire population of 180,000 children under 18. The autism rate they found was 3.3 per 10,000. So that's in line with the 1 in 10,000 that was found in Wisconsin 17 years earlier. For context, today, the last number of 1 in 36 is 83 times higher. In 1987, out of 1 million, every 1 million kids, 330 were diagnosed with autism.
The year I was born.
Today, there are 27,777 for every million.
So we need to look at, what has happened between 1987 and now, where we're seeing this huge increase, because something doesn't line up. Something isn't lining up. This isn't the children of autistic people that are being born. This huge increase, it doesn't make sense. If you just look at it as a genetic process, that we've now got it 83 times the amount, that doesn't weigh up to the hereditary link. That doesn't weigh up that the only people that the rise is because autistic people are having autistic children. That doesn't weigh up. And I know that from the people that I've worked with a lot of people who have level 3 children who have autism, and their parents are not diagnosed. This isn't level 3 autistic people having children who are level 3 autistic children. This is people who are not diagnosed, okay? And I've met the parents, I've worked with the children. The children have a severe disability, and the parents are working, they're fine, they're whatever, So, I mean, yes, they could be high masking, high functioning, level 1 Asperger's, autism. Yes, that could be a thing. But to see an 83% rise, that's insane. That's insanity.
If you accept the epidemic deniers narrative, you have to believe that researchers in North Dakota missed 98.8% of the children with autism. That thousands of profoundly disabled children were somehow invisible to doctors, teachers, parents, and even their own study.
And also, the people who are being diagnosed at this current moment in time with autism, that are all talking about it really loudly, like me, ironically, are people with level 1, are people with Asperger's. Now, perhaps that portrayal at this current moment in time that looks like autism, maybe that isn't autism. What if we have a poisoning from a chemical agent? What if it's something that looks like autism, and actually I don't have autism, they don't, you don't have autism if you're watching this and you have, what if we don't actually have autism and we have a neurodevelopmental condition that has come on as a result of something that our parents were taking, in utero or post-birth? Do you not think that would be the greatest scandal that we would need to look at? And I know damn well that there are a lot of things that have been said to be safe, that the medical community have put forth, that pharmaceutical communities have put forth, that have told you that are safe, that the studies have been done, and a few years later, oh, good Lord, actually, sorry, we've been poisoning all of you. Now, the reason why RFK wants to do this now reactively and create a registry is if we wait another 2 years to manage this issue, there's going to be another huge increase. So we have to be reactive to it. We can't just sit on our laurels and say, oh, well, hopefully it's just this and nobody's being poisoned. Like, if people are being poisoned, that's an important thing to review. And the only way that we can do that, at the current moment in time, I'm studying psychology at master's level, and I'm infuriated. By the time we get round to actually studying anything, like the pandemic, for instance, by the time we get round to studying the emotional and mental effects of shutting the schools down and isolating people, it's 2 years down the line and the damage has already been done. There's no way that psychologists now can rectify the damage that's already been done, because we're always having to have a reactionary process rather than actually putting things in place that stops these stuff from happening. So I don't understand the rhetoric. I don't understand why people hate RFK. I don't understand you guys. I really don't. I think you need to stop reading the headlines. I think you need to start having critical thought and making your own minds up instead of just reading a headline somewhere and then running with it.
Same researchers who followed the original code for 12 years to double check their number. They went back in 2000 and found that they had missed exactly one child.
Oh,
So doctors and therapists in the past were not stupid. They weren't missing all these cases. The epidemic is real. Between 1959 and 1965, researchers from 14 hospitals associated with major universities undertook the National Collaborative Perinatal Project, tracking 30,000 children from birth to age 8. This was no half-baked survey-based analysis.
Like, these longitudinal studies take so much time and so much effort to track that many children. This is not just a small study. This is a massive study. And to do these studies gives you a lot of information, a lot of data, and a lot of ability to judge what's going on. So studies like these really should be listened to.
The study conducted 9 separate screenings covering neurology, psychology, speech, language, hearing, and visual function.
Huge.
Every developmental quirk, anomaly, and disorder was logged with painstaking detail. Autism, a condition characterized by profound impairments in social communication and behavior, would have stood out like a neon sign. There were 14 cases. That's 4.7 per 10,000. So we know what the historic numbers are, and we know what the numbers are today. And it's time for everybody to stop attributing this to this ideology of epidemic denial. In 2009, the California State Legislature charged the Mind Institute at UC Davis because this myth was already becoming pervasive, the myth of epidemic denial was already becoming pervasive in the mainstream media. The California legislature directed the Mind Institute at UC Davis to answer the question. And Irva Hertz-Pichotto is a highly esteemed, revered scientist, neurology, and epidemiologist, came back with a definitive answer. The epidemic is real. Only a very, very small portion of it can.
So remember, back in the pandemic, we were all being shouted at to trust the science, and now what? We're not supposed to trust the science now. Now we don't like the science because we're trying to cure autism. What's going on? The incongruence between the mainstream and their ideologies. One time that they say one thing and then repeat something else. We're constantly being gaslit by these ideologies.
There are many, many other studies that affirm this. And instead of listening to this canard of epidemic denial, all you have to do is start reading a little science, because the answer is very clear. Yeah. And this is catastrophic for our country.
So I've worked with people who are neurodivergent for the majority of my teaching career. Prior to that, I worked as a support worker for people who had profound learning disabilities, which included level 3 autism. I have taken numerous certificates. I am a qualified lecturer. I'm now studying a master's in psychology, as well as being an autistic person who has hyper-focuses, an obsession with researching this stuff. And I've been researching the food industries, I've been researching pharmaceuticals, I've been researching a lot of this kind of weird shit that a lot of people don't research. Some of the things that are my special interests have been psychology, have been nutrition, have been health in general. And I've been looking at these things for over 20 years now. And I've been following the data, I've been following the research, and I'm pretty good at pattern recognition. Generally, I'm one of those annoying people who said it 10 years before you guys caught up. Now, everything that I have heard RFK say in the numerous amounts of speeches that I've listened to, not just the headlines, not just the clickbait, not just the thing that you may have read that was one thing that somebody else told you that was paraphrased incorrectly. Nothing he says is ringing any bells with me as being false, wrong, incorrect, or running down an incorrect pathway. And one of the biggest problems I think that we have is that new data comes out. So for instance, there was a study that was done in 2025, and it's very, very new, and it's literally come out to say that junk food causes ADHD-like symptoms, causes mental health issues, causes colorectal cancer. Are you going to hear it? Of course you're not going to hear it, because the mainstream media is pretty much owned by these conglomerates. You have a lot of these companies that literally pay universities to do studies for them to say that their products are healthy and safe and whatever. The studies aren't really real because they are biased. If you're reading a study that's biased with somebody that has a vested interest, it's unethical. What vested interest does RFK have to bring down pharmaceutical companies? The food industries, we have a lot of stuff that has been infiltrated into society under the guise of safety, under the guise of research that has been bought and paid for by the people that are selling you the stuff, so it's bias. And we don't really know the long-term ramifications of these substances in our food, of these substances in our air, of these medications. We don't know. You know, we're still living within a lot of the research period of this stuff. Even things like, birth control, hormonal birth control. This was brought in the 60s. We don't know what the long-term ramifications of it is because it's only been 60 years it's been having it. The COVID pandemic, we don't know what the long-term ramifications of those vaccines are because we're still in the research period of it. In 20 years' time, all of us could grow an extra limb. Who the hell knows? We don't know. So the idea that we should stop researching things because, well, we know the answer is dumb and it's unscientific. We continue to research things because we learn new things with each research, and knowledge is power.
There's a recent study by Blaxell et al. And a team of other researchers said that the cost of treating autism in this country by 2035, so within 10 years, will be $1 trillion a year. This is added to already astronomical healthcare costs. And then there's an individual injury. These are kids that this is a preventable disease. We know it's an environmental exposure. It has to be. Genes do not cause epidemics. They can provide a vulnerability. You need an environmental toxin.
I mean, that's a big statement, and it's going to get people's backs up. But if you hear what he's saying instead of getting triggered by it, you can understand what he's saying. Like, is there a genetic predisposition to autism? Yes, we know that. But the rate that autism is increasing, there must be an epigenetic factor that is causing it. Because it doesn't make sense. As I said, we haven't got that many people that have had children to have increased it this level fold. The birth rate is going down significantly in the UK and is going down significantly in America. So we have very low birth rates in comparison to the previous generations. So it doesn't make sense that this could go up 83% fold when we're having less children. It doesn't make any sense. So it must be an environmental factor. It must be something that's epigenetic. And we have studies to say that there are epigenetic factors that cause autism. So, I don't know why people are getting confused about this. I think probably because you haven't looked at the research. I think that's probably what it is. You just hear the mainstream rhetoric, it's genetic, it's genetic, it's genetic. And it's like, yeah, it is genetic, but it's also, okay, there can be more than one cause for something.
And Irva Hertz-Pachoda pointed out that because of this mythology, that the amount of money and resources put into studying genetic causes, which is a dead end, has been historically 10 to 20 times the amount spent by NIH and other agencies to study environmental factors, to study exposures, to study external factors, and that's where we're going to find the answer.
And again, follow the money. So if you've got an industry that is, the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry that makes trillions off of people being sick, don't you think that there may be a kind of a vested interest to continue a rhetoric that it's genetic and that it's nothing that we're doing, it's nothing that's happening around us? Or vice versa, if you've got petrochemical companies or food industry companies that are causing this through their own kind of environmental factors, don't you think that they have a massive vested interest to keep that stum? And so may invest in, genetic research, or may invest in media companies pushing this rhetoric, or may invest in, I don't know, whomever, a corporate shill, a shill of some form, pushing a rhetoric that keeps us under the idea that it's just this. When I start to see this kind of groupthink stuff going on, whatever it is, where do these sound bites come from? Where does this soundbite come from and who starts it? Because it seems to be this kind of groupthink that happens. And often when you challenge people on it and you ask them about their opinion, they don't have anything. There's nothing to back it up. And so it's like, well, why are you repeating this thing then? You know, and often it's because of white knighting, because they feel like they're doing something good and they want to be seen as a good person and they want to be seen on the right side of history. But often, you know, these ideas of groupthink are often not on the right side of history, guys. On the right side of history is being open, being conscious, being self-aware, and trying to do better than what the generation had previously. Now, if our generation has got significantly larger amounts of autism and could be being caused by environmental factors, that is not our generation doing better than the generation previously. And so our generation has a responsibility to do better than our parents' generation did. We have a responsibility to leave this world in a better place than we found it. I'd love to hear what your opinions are. I don't want to tell you what to think, but I want to tell you to think. So if you haven't watched the debate, if you haven't actually watched his speeches, please go and actually watch the speeches and make your minds up. And if you don't know what he's talking about, go and look at the research papers. You know, go look at the research papers. We are in the age of information. There is absolutely no reason to be ignorant in this generation. So take a little bit of time to go and actually do some learning before you form an opinion, and then form your opinion. And if you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. If you disagree with RFK, that's absolutely fine. That's what liberty is about. But what is really important is that you actually understand what it is that you're talking about before you talk about it. So I love you guys. This has been a really interesting thing to talk about. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care of yourselves.